Put one proposition to the witness, if I may.
I'm sure the representatives of AMCU won't object, so please do so.
Thank you, Chair.
Phambi kokuba kubuze amkho umhlekazi usebenza uthi kwinto enye nje athanda ukuthi ayicacise. Umhlekazi uSiminya.
We are going to argue that the Mambush group to which we are part went around the kraal with an intention to attack the police.
Sizawubeka ke thina pa commission ukuba eliqela lika Mambush lalijikela phaya ngasebuhlanti injongo ukukuhlasela amapolisa. Uthini kulonto?
Kwakunganjalongo.
No, it was not so.
Thank you, Chair.
Enkosi.
Mr. Phatsha, I represent AMCU.
Lo mama uthi umele iAMCU.
Enkosi.
Thank
I
you.
would like to ask you some questions about what happened after you went
Sorry,
through the kraal.
Forgive my...
I'll do so, Chair. I'm DeVos, D-E space V-O-S.
Mama uthi force.
I'm an advocate, Chairperson.
Uyi advocate. Nivile lonto?
Thank you, Chair.
Force. Uthi uthanda ukubuza imibuzo embalwa nje ukuba afumana uba kwenzeka ntoni apha.
Mr. Phatsha, I'm going to ask you some questions about what happened after you went through the kraal.
Uthi ufuna ukubuza uba xa use uphumile phaya ebuhlanti kwenzeka ntoni.
On the 16th of August.
Le mina thetha ngayo ke ngumhla ka16 kuAugust.
You gave evidence yesterday that there was a hippo in front causing a lot of damage. I was scared of being run over by that hippo.
Veka uthetha izolo usithi kwakukho ihippo eyayi phambi kwenu apho eyayenza umonakalo omkhulu woyika wena okokuba ingahle ikuchayise le hippo.
Mr. Phatsha, where was that hippo?
Awusiqale yayiphi kakuhle le hippo?
Le hiphu yayihamba bucala nami kwexesha ndiphuma esibayeni ndibalekayo ihamba ngezantsi kanje so.
As I went out of the kraal running, the hippo was, he indicates on my right hand side, running parallel to how I was running.
Why were you scared of that hippo?
Yintoni eyakwenza ukuba uyeyike le hippo ukuba ngahle ibe ingozi kuwe?
Wabethi abantu xa bedlula kuyo ibagila.
When people were going past it, it would bump them.
In which apologies, can you go to slide 194 of Exhibit L?
I guess it's up 194. Nanku 194. I'm looking at it, yes.
Can you try and indicate for us on that map where the Nyala came from?
It's not a map, it's a photograph, isn't it?
Le hiphu yayivela ngasesibayeni ibheka ngapha ngasentabeni.
The hippo was driving from the direction of the kraal towards the kopie.
When you say it was bumping people, what does that mean?
Xa uthi ibagila usho ibagila ngoluphi uhlobo kasichazele.
Ukubagila kaloku umuntu uthi xa ngaba hamba ecakweni ole imgile awude awe phansi.
As a person is walking and it goes past him, it bumps him to an extent that some of them fell.
What were you doing at the stage when the hippo was bumping people?
ngelo xesha ke igila abanye igqitha ipho wena ubusenzani?
Ndibalekela ukuyojikela elokwentaba ukuba ndiyabhabha apha kule ndawo ichiyekileyo apha ndilimele khona.
I was running towards the hill to hide because I had the difficulty in running with my the piece of flesh hanging from the wound.
Thank you, Chair. Those are our questions.
Enkosi ugqibezela lapho mama.
Who's going to cross-examine on behalf of the families?
Ozawubuza ke
Good
morning, Chairman.
You're back with us
Zentsapho.
after various other
kuza
activities.
umhlekazi yena kuntsebeza
about in the
ngoku.
newspapers. But we're not concerned with that now. You have questions for the witness, do you?
Yeah, there they are, just a couple of questions.
Uthi mbuzo nje mbalwanyana.
Can I get indulged, Chair, to introduce myself in a language that I think this gentleman will understand?
Ufuna ke ukuthi umhlekazi akubekele ngolimi ozaliva ukuba ungubani yena.
Uyimambana yasengqeleni.
Ngwasengqeleni tata.
Are you from that area, a young man from Ngeleni area? Yes, I am from Ngeleni, sir.
Kwilali yasebhukwini ndingumzangwe isibongo.
Yeah.
My clan name is Mzangwe. I'm from the village.
Ukhwalo ngamanye amagama.
In other words, the son of Palo.
Yes. Now, I just wanted to establish that in his case.
Uthi benifuna kuvala loo nto.
Ulimbondo.
Enkosi.
Thank you.
Now, there are just a couple of questions that I want to ask you about your evidence when you were answering to questions put by my colleague, Mr. Semenya.
Thanda nje ukubuza imibuzo nje embalwa ezawuba incaciso kwimibuzo oye wayibuzwa xa ubuzwa ngumhlekazi uSimenya.
And those questions were around the identity of a person who has come to be known as Mambush.
Lemibuzo ke ibiphathelene nendoda eyaziwa gqitha apha ngomambush.
Do you follow?
Uyavisa kahle?
Ndimame.
I'm listening, yes.
Yeah, and just for you to know, I represent the families of those people who were minors, whose relatives got killed on that day, on the 16th.
Uchike umhlekazi akuchazele kokuba yena uze apha kule commission emele ifamilies zabantu abasweleka kule kwesi sehlakalo.
And Mambush has come to be known, it is common cause that is one of the people who died on that day.
Ngoku ke umambush lokuthethwa ngaye ngomnye waba bantu abasweleka ngalo mini.
You know that, don't you?
Uyayazi ke loo nto andithi?
Ewe.
Yes.
Now, I understand that Mambush was a Bomvana. He came from Kanduli.
I have been andive ukuthi sithiwa umambush lona ngumfana webomvana uvela phaya what place it?
Mkanduli.
Mkanduli. Umuntu wasemkanduli. Kunjalo?
Ndive phaya uba ngumfana wasemqanduli uMambuchi ndandingamazi.
I did not know him, sir, but I came to know, to hear there that he was a man from Kanduli.
Yes, I thought so. But do you agree with me that with the passage of time, he has come to be known more by what he was wearing than to some people knowing him by sight? He was referred to as the man with the green blanket.
Uyavuma kokokuba usaziwa ngoku ke ngalento bekade inxiba waziwa njengendoda eyayinxiba ibhayile lihlaza. It is so.
Yes. And if that was the only thing to anyone like you who heard about it for the first time, in a certain place that that man is Mambush, you would associate anything green with him, sometimes mistakenly so.
xa kunjalo kokuba waziwa ngelibhayi lakhe liluhlaza njawo njengawo bungamazi kungenzeka okokuba abanye yonke into nje vela phaya elihlaza bacinga uba nguye uMambush loyana kanti kwamanye amaxesha benza impazamo kunjalo.
kunjalo.
That is correct.
Now I want to show you the picture that was shown by Advocate Semenya to you.
Thanda ukuba bake baveza umfanekiso apha oye wawuboniswa ngumhlekazi uSimenya.
I'm told, Commissioner, that it's what? Exhibit L206. Slide 206.
Apha ke kuthiwa slide
of exhibit double L.
206.
Exhibit L, sorry, exhibit single.
Now, there is a green, there's somebody wearing green there.
Uyayibona lento kulo mfanekiso kukho lo muntu unxibe into elihlaza okwenca.
Kulamambatho wembethe.
That is the kind of clothing he was wearing.
Now, I'll get to that question. I just want you to take one step at a time. We are going.
Sizawufika hapo masiyithathe kancinci kancinci lento. Yes sir.
Just look at the picture very closely.
Ujongisise kakuhle lo mfanekiso.
Now, I want to suggest to you that that green garment is not a blanket.
Mandibeke kuwe ukuba
It is a
lento ayinxibile
sweater.
apha liluhlaza okwenca. Akulo bhayi eli. Lo mfanekiso.
Just take your time. It's a sweater.
Kumnqa ndiyibonayo manje.
Now that you're drawing my attention to it, yes, it's only now that I see it.
Yes. And it's not as though he doesn't have a blanket. There is a blanket
Okuba le ndoda
over
ayinxibanga
that
bhayi le evela apha
green
kumfanekiso.
garment.
Ulinxibile andithi?
Elile ngaphezulu.
Yes.
Above the green, yes, he's got a blanket.
And it is not green.
Akulo bhayi elihlaza. Umbala walo.
Liyafanana nale ayinxibileyo inemikhono.
It's like what he is wearing that has got the sleeves.
What color do you think the blanket is?
Umbala welbhayi alinxibile unjani?
Dinokubhideka kuba imibala ngemibala. Dinongayazi mna ndinga khange ndiye esikolweni ngokuba ndazi into yoba le inji.
I have a difficulty with
no ntoni ezinjani. Mna ndazi into ebilihlaza olinjani.
Yes.
I have a difficulty with colors, Ms. Chairperson, because of the fact that I haven't been to school. Colors like green and the others, I cannot really say.
Yes. Now, if you look around the
To
chest,
be fair to him, he may be colorblind, you know.
no, I.
There are people who are colorblind.
No,
who
no,
can't tell the difference in colors. I don't think you have to go to school to be able to identify colors, but if you're colorblind, there's not much you can do about it. I know that he is colorblind, but maybe we should investigate that.
No. Yes,
Uthi
yes, Chair.
umgcini
No, I
kasihlalo
appreciate that.
kakwenziwa sisikolo kuphela kukho abantu nje noma bayile esikoleni abangakwazi ukuhlukanisa imibala yabo.
If you look around the chest area of
Ujonga lo
that
mfanekiso
photo,
jongisisa apha ngasesifubeni sakhe.
kukumbala ongathi uyimbola.
Uyamva uthini? There is a color there that would be, again, that ngodlo is to me in English
Yellow ochre.
a loka,
Yellow ochre.
yellow oak. That's ingodlo. Uthi kukho umbala uyingodlo.
And even at the back side, on his.
Ngomnye umbala.
Uthi na, that's a different color. The answer is that is a different color, yes.
Yes. Now, what I wanted to suggest to you is that that color, the red color,
uthi lo mbala lo ngathi ubomvu
if you look at it on his back and on his front, on his chest, that's a blanket that he has wrapped over the green sweater that he wears.
uthi
And we agree on that.
elihlaza ayinxibile isweta le kukho elibhayi livelile apha ngasemva ladela yovela nangapha kwihlombe lakhe langasesandleni sokunene uvumelana naye apha
Ndiyalibona.
I see it, yes.
Yes. Now let's go to slide one. What was this? L192.
Masiyeke komnye umfanekiso 192.
L192. Do you see that?
Uyawubona lo mfanekiso?
Ndiyawubona.
I see it, yes.
Now you will notice there. Now everybody's agreed that that is Mambush.
Apha
I
ke
also
akukho
agree.
umuntu uyikhanyela ile ukuba lo uye nyana uMambushi.
Kunjalo.
It is so, yes.
Now you will notice there, I suggest to you, that the sweater that that person is wearing a white sweater.
Awujongile apha uyasibona iskipa esinxibileyo simhlophe.
Ndiyasibona.
I can see it, yes.
And the green is the blanket around his neck.
Apha ngasentanyeni ke kubekho elibhayi lihlaza linxibileyo uyalibona?
Ndiyalibona.
I can see it, yes.
Now everybody agrees that that is Mambush.
Wonke umuntu uyavuma apha kuba lo nguye uMambushi.
Ndiyakuva.
I understand you.
Now let us look at them when they are all dead, or they are lying there after they had been shot. And that would be
Make sijonge ke apha sebalaliswe khona
L208.
badishu. I'd say 2
L208.
Nangu ke lo mfanekiso 208. Okay. I'm looking at it.
Yes. You see there
Yabona
that,
apha
that there is the person who's wearing an all green top. It's a sweater, not a blanket.
kukho umuntu onxibe isinxibo esilihlaza apha sinemikhono yabona okokuba siskipa
Where number 1 is pointing to.
apha kolathwe unumber 1. Yambona?
See that?
Ya ndiyabona.
Yes, I see it.
And that red blanket is beneath him.
Xa ujonga pha ezantsi kuye kukho lingubo elombala lo ubomvu
Under his right arm.
apha ngasesandleni sakhe sokunene. Uyabona?
Ngalo yakhe.
Ingalo yakhe le.
Ndiyabona.
I can see it, yes.
Yes. Now next to him,
Apha ecani kwakhe
you see
Blanket ikhomba uMambushi.
that same man you saw
says
with a
it's the
pair of
blanket.
dungarees and a white sweater and a green blanket.
Uthi
see
apha ke
that?
ngulaa mntu benxibe iskipa esimhlophe nebhayi liluhlaza elivele phaa uyalibona?
Ndiyalibona.
I can see that, yes.
So that there's no doubt that Mambush is wearing a white sweater and not a green one.
Who's this?
It's
Does he have it?
yeah,
Now, if there was any doubt that Mambush was wearing a white shirt or white sweater on that day, there is, I'm told by my juniors, an exhibit DDD 6.4. Is it 6.4? Yeah.
Right. Triple D 6.4 is the one you.
Thank you, Chair.
a postmortem photo of Mambush.
Now, that is a post-mortem photo of Mambush.
Apha ke ngumfanekiso owathathwa emva kokuba eseswelekile uMambushi. Uyabona lo mfanekiso?
You remember even yesterday,
I can see it, yes.
Mr. Simenya presented to you as an indication of that person being Mambush.
Uyakhumbula izolo umhlekazi oSiminya ekuqala ukuba ngumambushi lo muntu.
Recall that.
Khumbula lonto.
Ndiyakhumbula.
I remember that, yes.
Now, you can see, even colorblind as you may be, and I am also guilty of that, that the sweater or shirt that he is wearing is a white shirt.
Noma ke ungumuntu ongena obona kakuhle imibala kodwa apha kuyabonakala ukuba esiskipa sinxibile esombala omhlophe. Kunjalo?
Yeah, wesingumbala omhlophe.
Yes, it's of a white color.
So if we now went to where you were started to identify Mambush, and that is L206, it seems to me, and I would suggest to you, and I would argue this, that the person whom you had initially identified as Mambush, for the reasons that I indicated, is in fact not Mambush. The one on photograph 206.
Sisiza kulomfanekiso 206 kuyabonakala ukuba apha kwenzeke impazamo xa usithi lo muntu lovele apha ngumambushi. Kunjani?
Ngokuba into ewayegqokile iyafana neya ingaphaya kodwa ayifani straight.
Yes, sir, I agree, but it's because what he was wearing, what this person on 206 is wearing, is the similar color to that one on the other side, though
Yes,
not exactly.
no, we're agreed about that. I mean, it's a mistake that is common that you would make.
Siyavumelana nawe apho kwenzeke nje
I think you're
impazamo.
not the only person who made that mistake, so you don't have to feel ashamed.
Akusunguwe wedwa owenza impazamo njengaleyo, wonke umuntu uyayenza.
We had a duty to unravel the common mistake to everybody. Now, just to round off this little point,
Xa ndigqibezela ke le eliphuzu nithetha ngalo,
without suggesting anything else, but that photograph, and I'm talking about that photograph alone, there isn't anybody there who's wearing a white sweater and a green blanket.
xa sijonge lo mfanekiso njengoba uvele phaya na apha akubonakali umuntu onxibe iskipa esimhlophe apho noma.
Akabonakali.
No, nobody is wearing white there.
Now, to go to another point, I believe that, I don't know whether you are currently a member of the NUM or you were a member of the NUM.
Ke uchaze
What is the
apha
position right
uselungu lombutho iNUM nangoku ikanena usekho ku.
Andiselilo ilungu le-NUM.
I'm no more a member of the NUM.
But around when you got injured, you were still a member of NUM.
Kodwa ke ngeliya xesha xa uza kwenzakala ulilo ilungu le-NUM.
Bendililungu le-NUM kusukela ndaqala igoli bendililungu le-NUM. Toti ngoDisemba kulo mnyaka uphelile.
I was, until December last year, all along been a member of the NUM since I started.
Yes.
Ukufika eGauteng.
Since my arrival around Gauteng.
Which was when?
Ngomphi unyaka ke xa ufika beGoli?
Ndiqale igoli ngo-1982.
This was in 1982.
So you have been virtually as long a member of NUM as the organization itself. That's just about 30 years, isn't it?
Ngaba phaya kweminyaka njengayo iNUM iqale ngaleyo minyaka engaba 30 ulungu.
Kunjalo.
It is so.
So for 30 years you owed your loyalty to NUM.
Ngoku ke iminyaka emithathu ungumuntu oyithandayo yonke into inkolelo yakho
Mashumi amathathu
eminyaka.
Bendiyithanda iNUM kodwa into edale into obana mandiphume ku sorry.
He said, yes, I loved the NUM. The reason I left was and then he was stopped by council.
No, yes, because the question I was simply asking is,
Umbuzo nje
you
bewubuza ukuthi
agree then that you have been a loyal member of the NUM for 30 years?
umbuzo ubusuphendula ukuba iminyaka engamashumi amathathu ulilungu eliqatha phaya ku-NUM.
Kunjalo.
It is so, sir.
And out of your salary, there was an amount that was deducted as and for subscription for membership of the NUM for that number of years.
Ndithi kuyo yonke le minyaka bekuthi phapha emvuzweni wakho kubekho imali ethize ethathwayo yobulungu be-NUM.
Ibithathwa total yonke le minyaka
Yes.
bekuthathwa imali emvuzweni wami endihola.
Totally, yes, for all the years, deduction was made from my salary for membership.
Now, when you got injured, in the manner in which you have told the chairman and the commissioners, did you get hospitalized?
Also wenzakala ke njengoba uxele i-chairman ne-commissioners uye wayiswa esibhedlela. Ngale mini wenzakala uye walala esibhedlela.
Ndiye ndalaliswa esibhedlela.
Yes, I was admitted in the hospital.
Do you know if anybody from the NUM visited you in the hospital?
Ngoku kukho ke omnye we-NUM oye waza phaya wakundendela ezokubona esibhedlela.
Azange bekho.
Nobody came.
Have they ever contacted you in any way, NUM members?
Kude kube namhlanje ke mfoka baba akukho umuntu we-NUM oweza kuwe azothetha nawe ngalento?
Akukho namnye.
Not a single person.
I can tell you as a fact that in this commission, my learned brother, Carol Tip, is a lawyer from NUM. Now,
Uthi ke makwazisa umhlekazi okokuba apha njengoba silikule commission.
have you ever been
Umhlekazi uTip ongomnye wabameli umele i-NUM.
Have you ever been offered any legal assistance by NUM as a loyal card-carrying member of 30 years?
Njengomuntu ke obelungu lalombutho iminyaka engamashumi amathathu bake beza kuwe be-NUM bazokwenza mhlawumbe usizo lwemthetho ukuthi bazokunceda ngento ethize apha kwezomthetho?
Azange.
Not at all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. That's our cross.
Enkosi ndigqibile mhlekazi.
Anyone else wish to ask anything in cross-examination of the witness before I ask Mr. Mpofu if he wishes to re-examine?
Chair, perhaps just to go back to the issue that was outstanding at the time when I finished my cross-examination.
Reserve your right to,
Yes, they still haven't
start cross-examination again.
Yes, I'm
So
advised.
you may do so.
No, Chair, I'm advised by the evidence leaders that they have not been able to locate the video, which they call the Mr. Chaskalson's videos, and they're still looking for it. So we haven't made much progress, Chair. I will probably advise the Commission at a later stage what is to occur.
Uthi umhlekazi bengagqiba ukuza imibuzo
you're
ngoba
still
kwakho
reserving your
ivideo
rights.
beyimele bekufanele ivele kweli cala ngoba
That is duly
bangayifumani
recorded.
le kamhlekazi uShakalsen.
Chair, just to clarify the position, we have established that the video clip that Mr. Mutau is looking for is not one of the exhibits that were on Mr. Chaskalson's compilation. But I did have a word with Mr. Chaskalson, and he recalls having seen the video on one of the hard drives. He just couldn't find it at that particular time, and he said he'll revert once he finds the particular video clip we're referring to.
Uyachaza kokokuba noma bake bayibona leyo video kodwa ke beyingekho kule
You have
mfanekiso
to be
abanayo
content with
ngoku
that,
basayijonga
Mr.
ngoku.
Chair.
Yes.
Chair, just for the record, we place on record that there are 19 nyalas on the day of the 16th. So we should not be assumed to accept as correct the evidence that there was a Nyala bumping people around. It's just that I can't cross-examine without consulting 19 drivers of Nyalas to see if that is factually accurate. We just place it on record.
Yes, as I understand. You can, of course, consult them or have someone consult them, a team of people consulting them, and if necessary, you could recall the witness to deal with this issue if you consider it important enough. Sorry, no further cross-examination. Before Mr. Mpofu re-examines, Advocate Hemraj would like to ask some questions.
Yes, Mr. Phatsha, the informal settlement in Kaneng, there are other points of access to the settlement apart from the one directly behind the police line.
Xa usiya phaya ku mikhukhule imatyotyombe wasenkanini andithi zikhona ezinye izindlela ezingena apho kule mkhukhu ngaphandle kwale ebewuthetha ngayo egqitha phaya.
Kwakungekho ndlela kuba kukho isibaya esibiywe ngocingo ngoku na kwabe kuvaliwe ngapha yangasicingweni kungekho ndawo yokudlula. Indawo yokudlula ile siyibonayo ba isizawuhamba kakuhle side siyongena emikhukhwini.
There was only one visible entrance at that time. As one goes towards the crawl is surrounded by wire, and there was no entrance there except the road that we intended taking.
Yes, I understand that, but apart from that entrance, are there other entrances to the settlement at other points around the settlement?
Ngaphandle kwalo uthetha ngayo ke kodwa kukho enye indlela ungahamba ngayo xa uyofika phaya uya phaya enkanini emzini ngaphandle kwale o enanithatha.
Isibaya esina singapha ngaseca kwesisinci sincane kukho kufakwe ucingo ayikho indlela yokudlula ngapha kolucingo. Indlela i-straight ba siphume apha singene endleleni sinqumle enhla komkhukhu sihambe siyongena.
There was one straight way past the crawl into the road that leads to Enkaning. The one next to the crawl, that was surrounded by wire and one could not go through there.
So apart from that entrance,
Phande kwaleyo ke
are there other entrances, other points of access?
kukho ezinye izindawo ongafikeleleka ngayo phaya
Any
emikhukhwini.
other place around the settlement?
Ezinye izindawo ongajikeleza uyongena phaya emikhukhwini ngazo ngaphandle kwaleyo.
Yayingekho indlela kuba kwakuvaliwe ngamapolisa.
There was no other way because the place had been surrounded by the police.
Is the settlement surrounded by a fence or a wall at all?
La matyotyombe ukuthi la phaya le ndawo esihleni emkanini ivale ngocingo ibiyele ngocingo yonke.
Sisibaya esina sinocingo ngapha.
It's the crawl.
Indlela i1 efanele basiphume kuyo sizokwazi ukujikela sibaleke singene emikhukhwini.
It's the crawl that is surrounded by a fence. And then next to it there is the road which leads straight to the shack settlement.
Is the shack settlement surrounded by a wall or a fence at all?
Xa usiya phaya ematyotyombe kukho ucingo olibiyele la matyotyombe noma mhlawumbe umthangala othize wakhiwe phaya.
Ubiyiwe emikhukhwini. Umkhukhu nomkhukhu unecingo lawo awubiyelwe ngalo.
Now each and every shack is surrounded by its own fence.
And the entire settlement, has that got a wall or a fence around it?
Xa usuthatha ke yonke imikhukhu lapho akho cingo olibiyele yonke loo ndawo.
Alukho.
There is no such a fence.
Now, from where you were on the mountain, the police lineup, was that clearly visible to you?
Njengoko niphaya ke entabeni amapolisa apha bekhona phaya abebonakala kakuhle ukuba nanka amapolisa.
Ebebonakala.
Yes, very clearly.
And you could see the number of policemen standing very close together in a line.
Nanikwazi ukuwabona amapolisa eme engumgqa kanje.
enza umgca kwakuba bevalile ngeya fence ngolacingo lusuka phezulu luza esibayeni.
They stood in that one line after closing up with the barbed wire.
And you could also see from where you were on the mountain all the police vehicles lined up there as well.
Xa niphaya entabeni neenqwele zamapolisa nanikwazi ukuzibona apho zimi khona. Kunjalo?
Sasizibona.
Yes, they were visible.
Now, if you'd be so kind as to look at slide L206, please.
Singajonga apha lo mfanekiso ke u206 kuwo lo.
You've told us that you were part of that group.
Uthi ubukweli qela wena.
Ewe.
Yes.
And at that stage, that's depicted in that slide, you were trying to get to the settlement, to the entrance to the settlement.
Uthi apha nibalekela emikhukhwini.
Kunjalo.
It is so.
And when we looked at the video yesterday, that group, all of you were walking very closely together, slightly bent over.
Uthi siye sabona umfanekiso apha izolo. Nikunye phaya phambili engathi nigobile kanje. Ngendlela nanamba ngayo. Ngolhlobo kunjalo.
Umuntu uhamba ngohlobo alucingileyo.
A person walks away in a manner in which he deems fit, the way he thinks.
Yes,
Anyway.
I appreciate that. I'm just saying to you that when we looked
Melana
at the
nawa.
video yesterday, showing that scene that's there in that slide 206, the group of which you were part of were all walking together, slightly bent over, but walking at that stage.
Uthi ngelo xesha beningabaleki njengoba bekunantsika nihamba kodwa nihamba ngolohlobo njengoba kuvele phaya nikunye. Uvumelana naye apho?
Yeah.
I agree.
And from that point, you were even closer to that lineup of policemen and police vehicles that you were able to see from your spot on the mountain.
Sithe xa sijonga ke apho benikufuphi namapolisa lawa abephaya phambi kwenu kusuka phaya entabeni. Kunjalo?
Amapolisa ayekhona.
The police were there.
And would it have been clearer to you from this closer position than the mountain how many policemen and how many vehicles were lined up there in front of you?
Ngeli xesha ke senifike apha njengoba sibona phaya bese nikwazi ukubona kakuhle okuba amapolisa mangapi apho kunexesha nisephaya entabeni ningakaboni kakuhle ngeli xesha bese nibona kakuhle ukuba angakanani amapolisa apha phambi kwenu. Kunjalo?
Sasiwabona.
We could see them, yes.
And you told us yesterday that you were intended to go through that police line towards the entrance to the settlement.
Uthe ke izolo benifuna ukuba niphume phaya kuwo lamapolisa.
Kange nditsho ndithe.
No, I did not say that. I said
Ndithe siya endleleni egodukayo eya emkhukhwini.
we were on our way to the road that would lead us to the settlement.
And that road, sir, was behind the police line.
Lindlela ke beniya kuyo ibingasemva kule line yamapolisa.
Njani?
In what way?
The entrance to that road was behind where the police were standing.
Andithi njengoba niza nje kwakufuze nigqitha apha emapoliseni indlela ingale ngasemva kwawo lena niyongena kuyo nami.
Zange ndiyibone ke leyo.
No, that I did not observe.
Yes, thank you.
Enkosi.
My colleague, Advocate Kotta, also wishes to ask some questions.
Mhlekazi uCommissioner uTakota naye ufuna nje ukubuza imibuzo nje mbala.
Mr. Mambush, I got the impression yesterday that, I'm sorry, Mr.
No, this is
Yaxolisa
Phatsha,
ukubiza
this is
uMambush.
Phatsha.
I'm sorry, Mr. Phatsha, I'm very sorry.
Asha ndiyaxolisa
I
kakhulu.
got the impression yesterday that in order for you to get into the informal settlement, you would have to go through the line of police.
Izolo uthe xa uthetha apha ndeva usithi ukuze nifikelele kunendlela isiya emkhukheni kwakufuze nigqithe phakathi kwawo amapolisa lawo. andithi?
Sasingenayo indlela yokungena phakathi kwamapolisa. Safika kuvaliwe endleleni efanele basihambe kuyo. Sabaleka sajikela phansi kwesibaya.
We had no way of going through the police because our way was blocked and we turned away and ran towards the crawl.
So the road to the informal settlement was clear.
Clear. Indlela lebisiya emkhukhwini
There
yona
was no impediment, in other words, for you to get there.
I'm sorry, sir.
There was no impediment for you to get to the informal settlement after you had gone round the corner.
komqobo onganivimba kokuba niyofikela kulondle.
Sichile indlela le isuka ivela ngaseMarikana iya emikhukhwini ngendawo bakuvaliwe kweyandawo ufanele basiphume kuyo sazojikela phansi kwesibaya nje sijikeleswa into yokuba indlela ivaliwe.
Mr. Chairperson, we left the idea of getting to that road because of the blockade. It was closed, we could not go through, and that is the reason we turned towards the crawl.
So if you had to turn around the crawl, there was no blockade whatsoever for you to get to the informal settlement.
Anijike lapha ngasebuhlanti ke bekungekho umqobo apho bekungekho umqobo bekungekho into ebengaba isithibelo apho kuba ningakwazi ukufika endleleni.
Sivalelwe ngamapolisa xa sijikela elokwesibaya uba sisiya endleleni yokuba siye emikhukhwini.
The police were the only blockage there. When we turned around the crawl, the police were there and then they started firing.
Thank you.
Enkosi.
Would you please look at slide 198 in Exhibit L? Perhaps that could be shown to you.
198, sir.
Yes, 198.
Masijonga pa umfanekiso lo 198. Yabona?
Yeah.
I can see it, sir.
Do you see Mr. Norkie or Mambush on that slide?
Mr. Noki umambushi yabonakala kulo mfanekiso.
Ibona iblanket lifana newayembethe.
I see a blanket similar to the one that he was wearing.
Where's that?
Ukuphi kulo mfanekiso?
Usecakwe uhamba bucala kwehip.
He's walking next to the hippo, next to the nyala.
Where do we see him? Where on the hippo? Where in line with the hippo?
Endawo xa ujonga ababanye.
Uphambili mbijani kubo.
He's in front, but not much. He's in front of the people, but not much.
Is he the person walking in front of the hippo? The person on the extreme left of the photograph?
Xa uya ngasesandleni sokhohlo kulo mfanekiso lo ohamba ecani kwehippo nguye lo phambili.
Ndiyamfanekisa nami.
Looks like him. Yes.
There's also someone else who might be Mr. Norkie, and that's if you look at the coils of barbed wire, just at the rear section of the Nyala, the rear section, and just behind or in line with a point behind the coils of barbed wire, there's someone with dungarees and a white sweatshirt, and what looks like a green blanket over his left arm, in the forefront of the picture.
Uthi xa ujongisisa lo mfanekiso ujonga apha kugqibela khona ihippo phambi kokuba kuqale ucingo lo. Uthi kukho umuntu onxibe iskipa esimhlophe ophethe into elihlaza pha esandleni engayibhayi eli. Uyayibona?
Ndijonge.
I'm looking at it, yes, sir.
Could that also be Mr. Norkie?
Kungenzeka ukuba kwakunguye umambushi lo.
Ngokuba iblanket le akasayombathanga ndimazi xa embethe iblanket.
I can only recognize him when he's wearing the blanket. There he's not wearing it.
you just stay at that same slide, please? It's slide L198.
Awujongela umfanekiso 198 wona lo kanye.
You told us yesterday that the group were singing and chanting when you were walking alongside the Nyala.
Uthe izolo bekuhanjwa apha kuculwa kubethwa amagwijo oqala jikeleza apha kulenyala. Yakhumbula?
kunjalo.
It is so, yes.
And that you were waiting for the employer to arrive.
Uthi isizathu ke nimele umqesho kokuba eze apho kuni.
Namanje.
I'm still saying that.
At that stage, it would have been easy for the group to access the entrance to the settlement?
Elixesha ke kungakenzeka into bekungaba lulo kokuba nizisukele apho nihambe nje niye ematyotyombeni.
Silindile umqashi.
We were waiting for the employer.
Yes, I understand that. But at that
Evalon.
stage, before all the barbed wire had been deployed, it would have been easy for that group
Phambi
to access
kokuba
the settlement.
kudonse olucingo kubiyelo lo ndawo bekungaba lula kuno kokuba nenze isigqibo hayi masihambe ngokusiya ematyotyombeni.
Sasingayenza lonto xa ungaba umqashi efikile wasiphendula imfuno zethu.
We would have done that if the employer had come and responded to our demands.
Does that mean, yes, it would have been easier at that stage to access the settlement?
Kodwa umbuzo ukuthi bekuyoba lula ngelo xesha kokuba nihambe bekungekho mqobo.
Unoba andivakali.
Maybe I'm not understood.
At that point, when your group was next to the Nyala, all the barbed wire had not been deployed.
Ngelixesha nilapha kufuphi nenyala belingakafakwa ucingo andithi.
Had the group wished at that stage to proceed towards the settlement, it would have been easier to do so.
Abe nifisa ukuthi ke ngelixesha nihambe niye ematyotyombeni pha ekuhlaleni bekuzawuba lula bekungekho nto.
Bekungenoba lula umqeshi engakafiki asixelele ngemfuno zethu.
It wouldn't have been easy for us to do so. This is before the employer came to respond to our demands.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Phatsha.
Enkosi.
Dankie.
Thank
While
you.
we're still looking at that slide 198,
Asisajonge wona lo mfanekiso 198.
you are obviously part of that group depicted
Andithi
on
wena
the slide,
ungomnye.
although I take it it's not possible for us to identify you. Is that correct?
Kweli cela noma
Yes, you can
singakwazi
see
ukukolapha
yourself on the photograph.
njalo khona kweli cela.
Ndikhona.
I am in the group, yes.
Can you see yourself in the picture?
Wena ke xa ujonga uyakwazi ukuzibona uba uphi apha.
Andinozazi kuba sibaninzi.
I would not be able to identify myself because of the number.
Now, according to what the police have told us, just after that photograph was taken, water cannons started spraying the strikers who were coming forward, and stun and tear grenades were fired, rubber rounds were fired as well. Can you confirm that that's what happened?
Ubungqina
The people
obuvele
were there on
kumapolisa ke buthi
Spot depicted in that photograph?
kuthe ngeli xesha kuthatha lo mfanekiso xeshanyana nje ukuba uthethe lo mfanekiso basebeqala ukudubula ngeembumbulu zeraba babetha ii-water cannons babetha ne-tear gas ulingakavalwa ucingo kunjalo.
Ayikho keyo.
No, that's not, it's not so.
Not so. You see, because what the police say, and I'm checking whether that's correct by asking you these questions, is that I'll read you the relevant paragraphs from slide 199. Water cannons started spraying the attacking protesters. They say you were attacking. You deny that. But water cannons started spraying the attacking protesters to prevent them from entering the police enclosure. This action had no effect on the protesters and kept, I take it that should be they kept on coming forward. Public order policing members applied the less than lethal measures, including stun and tear grenades, firing of rubber rounds within the force continuum in an effort to stop and disperse the group of attacking protesters. This gave Inyala 4, that's the Inyala on the photograph, time to close the gap with the remaining barbed wire. Now, I take it you say that that's not correct.
Wena uyibeka ngolu hlobo bathi ke bona apha nanihlasela amapolisa ngelixesha ke bedubula ngeembumbulu zeraba babetha ngewater cannons babetha ngeli xesha linyala le itsala olucingo invalela apha uthi wena akuyonyani loo nto lo.
Zange siqalise ukukhangela amapolisa ngokuba sizilwe nawo. Amapolisa ayeme bucala pha ezihiphini.
We did not attack the police. We did not start attacking the police. They were standing quite a distance away from us with the nyalas there.
Amapolisa adubule emveni kokuba ebiyile ucingo.
The police only started shooting after they had enclosed the place with the barbed wire.
No, but the passage I read you didn't relate to the police shooting you. It related to stun and tear grenades being fired, rubber bullets being fired, and water cannons being used. Any of that happened while you people were at the place which we see depicted on slide 198.
Bathi bona babetha stun grenades babetha icannon ezamanzi inganono ezamanzi babetha nangembumbulu ezezeraba ngeli xesha nisela.
Ayikho ke.
No, that it is not so, Mr. Chairman.
I got the impression that you said yesterday that it was at that point that the police started spraying you with water and subjecting you to tear gas.
Awuzange usho loo nto awuzangixela loo nto izolo kokuba kuthe ngeli xesha nila basebeqala ukunithela ngenkanoni lezamanzi betha nange-tear gas.
Khange nditsho.
No, that I did not say.
I see. All right. So if I understood you to say that, then I must have misunderstood you.
Xa ndive engawuthetha loo nto ukuba ndenze impazamo.
Andinawukwazi ke.
I would not know that.
One other point that I must put to you, I think, for the sake of completeness. In slide 199, it is said that during this incident, that's the incident which the description which I've read to you, it is said in this incident, various shots were fired from the protesters at the police in Yala.
Kukho enye into ethethwa ngamapolisa apha ke bathi kungeli xesha kwenzeka yonke lento okuba kukho imbumbulu ezavela zidujula
ngabaqhankqalazi. Is it possible that one or some of the strikers may have fired shots at the police in Yala at that stage?
Kungenzeka ukuba kukho omnye apha kubaqhankqalazi owajongisa umpu emapoliseni wadubula inyala.
Zange ndiyibone loo nto.
That I did not observe.
Thank you. Mr. Mpofu, are you now ready to proceed with your re-examination?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Mr. Phatsha.
Morning, sir.
Namhlanje.
How are you today? I'm healthy, no problems. And how are you?
Siyavuka nathi.
No, we all. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask...
Now that the medical bulletins for the day are over, can we carry on with the evidence?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm also fine, Mr. Phatsha. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Let's start with the issue that was dealt with just now. On the 16th, this process of people singing and moving up and down, which you described, going back to the copy singing and so on, for how long did that take place?
lento bisenzeka phaya nge-16 adithi abantu bebeza apha bacula kuphindele emva kuphinde umva babuye bacule futhi iyathatha ixesha elingabangakanani loo nto senzeka
phaya kwixesha andinowuchana kakuhle uba yayilixesha elingakanani kodwa ke sasimane siyaphambili siphinde sibuye emva sisenzela ulinda umqeshe.
I would not be precise with the times, but it happened several times. We were singing, going and going back to the mountain and singing again all the time, waiting for our employer.
There is footage which I cannot access now, which shows that happening around about 11 in the morning. Could it have started that long back?
Ukho imfanekiso apha ebonisa okokuba lento iqale phaya ngo-11 kungenza kuba yasiqale emini kusasa ngo-11 kude kube elixesha.
Inokuba njalo.
It could be so, yes.
Yeah. So if that happened so many times over so many hours, would it be possible for you from one still frame to identify which of those several times you are going up and down?
Ubungabo xa yenzeka kaninzi kanje lento bongaba nako ukukhumbula okokuba ngobani nobani babeloku besihla benyuka besihla benyuka.
Andinokwazi bangubani nabani
No, I would not be.
Uyenyuka uyehlika kuba nami ndandinyuka ndisehlika.
Because I was one of those people going up and down, so I would not be able to say who of the group went up and down all the time.
Thank you.
Enkosi.
Then you have been questioned about this so-called police line.
Uye wabuza umbuzo ke ngaloo nto ebizwa ngokumqa wamapolisa.
Can you go to slide number 191?
Masize kulo mfanekiso ovele apha u191. Yawubona?
Ndiyabona.
I'm looking at it, yes.
Now, you see, can you see between there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nyalas. There's a yellow line between the crawl and those 5 nyalas, which is marked 50 meters. Can you see that?
Uyabona kukho inyala ezi. Kukho nankumka apha kubhalwe khona 50 meters uyawubona?
Exhibit L.
I can see it.
Right. Now,
on the screen hasn't got the yellow lines and the.
oh, of course, yes.
So
no, the one that you have in front of you.
Yeah, no, I was going to say.
Oh, I see for other people.
Yes.
Okay.
He must obviously look at the hard copy. The slide doesn't show what you're
umfanekiso phaya.
I see, Chairperson.
Kumabona kude awukhombisi ke lo mqa uyawubona ubonakala apha.
All right, for the benefit of those people who don't have this copy, you see the nyalas. There's a first line of nyalas, and I should assume those are the barbed wire nyalas. Then there's another, behind that, there's a kind of a semicircle of nyalas. Can you see that?
Ujongela umfanekiso
A horseshoe, probably.
apha ngasesandleni sokhohlo kukho eze ezingu-1 2 3 4 5 esekubakho eze ezenze i-round phaya ngasemva kwazo uyayibona?
Yeah, ndiyayibona.
I can see that, yes.
Yeah. Now, the 50 meters I'm talking about is between the crawl and the foot of the horseshoe, so to speak.
Apha ke kuthiwa zimeters eziyi-50 kusuka phaya kobu buhlanti ukuya kwezi zihipo ezilanga phambili.
If you look at the one, no, if you look at the one, this one, if you look at the one in front of you, you'll see the yellow line is between the crawl and that foot of the horseshoe.
Asijongela umfanekiso uyabona na ubuhlanti apha
Yeah.
bathi kusuka apha ukuza kwezi zihipo zimeters ezingaba ngu-50.
You see that yellow line?
Uyayibona loo nto?
Ndiyayibona.
I can see it, yes.
Right. Now, at that stage, can you see that there are many people on the road that you have testified about?
Eli xesha ke kukho abantu babonayo apha endleleni le njengo esiza ngapha. Abantu abaninzi bapha endleleni.
Abantu abasuka emikhukhwini abaya eMarikana bahamba kulandlela.
Yes, these were people walking from the Czech settlement towards Marikana. That's the road they use.
No, Mr. Phatsha. Can you see that there are many people on that road now?
Apha njengoba ivulekile, njengoba kuvulekile kukho abantu ababonayo apha kulondlela.
In front of the crowd.
Phaya phambi kwasebuhlanti. Apha phambi kobuhlanti. Khona abantu ababonayo apha.
I know they're too small, but can you try and look carefully?
Uthi xa ungajonga kakuhle kodwa babonakala bancinci.
Kunabantu ababonakalayo. Abanye abantu babesuka emikhukhwini besaya.
There are people visible on this slide, yes, but people who are walking from the Czech settlement going past there.
Okay, let me put it this way, Mr. Phatsha.
Mandibeke ngolu hlobo kuwe.
It is common cause. It will be common cause. It will be common cause.
Uthi kuyawuba into engena ayikhanyelwa into engakhanyelwa into evunywayo kokuba
that at that stage the barbed wire was in the process of being pulled.
Kuthiwa ke ngungeli xesha xa betsala inansika iwaya lena ucingo oluluhlabayo.
In fact, if you go to slide 197, that becomes clearer.
Xa siza apha ku 197 apho ibonakala kakuhle lento.
That picture at 197 is exactly the same one at exactly the same time as the one at 191.
Jongoba ujonge le mfanekiso emibili le
Okay.
mfanekiso nalo uthi mfanekiso efananayo ithethe ngexesha elilodwa.
Yeah. The time on both pictures is exactly 1540. And on the one at 197, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 arrows of the nyalas which were pulling the barbed wire.
Uthi xa ujonge le mfanekiso emibini le yathatha ngexesha elilodwa nale kodwa la kukho le migca eyelo emine 1 2 3 4 uyayibona?
Yeah.
I can see it.
So we can accept that it will be common cause that when that picture was taken, the barbed wire was more than, it was in fact 1, 2, 3, I think 3 or 4 of the nyalas had pulled the barbed wire, and I would assume people had started running away.
Ungeli xesha ke xa kutsala olucingo enye ihipi iphelela apha enye yaqala apha yatsala abantu basebeqala ukubaleka.
Njalo.
It is so, yes.
Yeah. Now that I've given you that information,
Nikileke olu lwazi.
what would you think the direction of the people that you see running on that road in front of the crawl? Which way would they be running to?
Ngoku ke xa bebona aba bantu abalanga sebuhlanti endleleni bebona kwenzeka lento bebazawubaleka baye kweli picala.
Bezawubaleka baphindele emikhukhwini.
They would run back towards the settlement.
Thank you.
Enkosi.
And so we know that by 1540, that road was accessible to everybody. It was not part of any so-called police line.
Ngoku ke siyaqonda ukuba ngeli xesha ngo1540 22
Yeah.
4 lindlela ibisi was not accessible, was
Well, was accessible, and people were using it, actually.
Bebasakwazi ukuhamba apho.
Bebesakwazi.
Yes, it was.
And from the people who were still at the copy, all this was visible because it's elevated. You
And
could
it
see
is-
these people using that road.
Intaba le benikuyo iphakeme ngoku benikwazi ukubona into eyenzeka pha ezantsi naba bantu abahamba phaya nibabona.
Kunjalo.
It is so.
Thank you. Now let's go to let's still talk about that road.
Thethe ngalindlela.
From the questions that were asked by Commissioner Dokota.
Masibuze le mibuzo. Buza ngale mibuzo bobuza uCommissioner uMhlekazi Dakota.
Can you just help the Commission with this?
Awuncede iCommission ngalento.
When the police shot at the group I'm talking about the rain of fire, the volley of fire that was directed towards the strikers. Were the police on the crawl side of that road or over that road?
Ngelixesha ke kuvulala imbumbulo apho kubethu khuluwa oluninzi. Amapolisa ebekweliphicala la lindlela ngapha ngasebuhlanti ikanene kweliyacala.
Ebengapha yakwecingo.
They were on the other side of the wire.
Of the road.
Cingo noma indlela.
I was asking you in relation to the road, sorry. Were they over the road as the people were coming behind the crawl, or were they on the nearer side of the road? In other words, okay, let me put it this way. If you had to go and greet one of them, would you have had to cross the road?
Andithi mhlawumbe ubufuna ukuba uyobulisa komnye wamapolisa kwakuzofuza ukuba ugqitha apha endleleni uye kuye noma babengapha ngakuni kwendlela.
Babengapha yakwecingo.
They were on the other side of the wire.
Okay. I'm asking about the road, Mr.
Ubuza apha ngendlela le. Andithi nina nani lapha ebuhlanti nansi indlela egqithayo apha. Kwakuvuza ukuba ugqitha apha endleleni xa uya kubo noma bona babengapha ngakuni. Benganeno kulendlela nganeno apha ngakuni.
Babengeneno kwendlela.
Babenganeno. They were on our side of the road. Ingasemva kwabo. Sorry, disturbed by uthi bebanganeno indlela isemva kwabo. Nina andithi nabo ubuhlanti bebanganeno kwendlela noma bengale kwelicala.
Njengamaxa kuvaliwe ngecingo. Icingo lafakwa lazochayisa esibayeni.
I'm sorry.
The wire was drawn up to the beginning of the crawl.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe it's my mistake, yes. All right, let's then start there.
Okay, masiqale apho.
You're saying that when you were accessing the road for the first time, was the wire was in front of you? Is that what you've been saying? Yeah.
Uthi xa nifuna ukuya pha endleleni okokuqala nafumana ukuba ucingo liphambi kwenu apha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now let's leave that part.
Then,
after that, you then go around the crawl, correct?
Ithi ke nabe senijikela ngale ngasebuhlanti.
Kunjalo.
It is so.
And then, which one was nearer to you? The police who were shooting in the line or the road after you went behind the crawl?
Ukuqanivela apha ngasebuhlanti ngubani ke intoni yayifuphi kunani indlela ikanene ngamapolisa.
Sadutshulwa ngamapolisa xa siqhamuka phansi kwesibane.
Immediately we came from behind the crawl, the police immediately shot at us.
Yes, and were they standing? Where were they standing? Was the road before them or were the police before the road?
Ngoku MEP amapolisa qanivela apha ngasebuhlanti nansi indlela phaya akwelicala.
Angaphambili kwendlela.
They were on the other side of the road.
Thank you. Yes. You have to cross the road, yeah. Okay. Now, you've also been questioned, I think, by Commissioner Hemraj and Mr. Semenya about why effectively you did not take the option of going towards the other crawls. You remember that?
uyakhumbula okokuba uCommissioner uHemraj uye wabuza lo mbuzo nomhlekazi uSimenye wafuna ukwazi okokuba yintoni ningenzanga isigqibo sokokuba nibalekele kobubunye ubuhlanti
And Mr. Muchape.
Opinion, mfam?
Just repeat, sir. I don't clearly understand.
Okay, yeah, no, that's because I have not yet asked a question. I was simply saying,
Bensachaza nje.
you've been questioned in general about why you did not take the option of running in the direction of the other crawls by Commissioner Hemraj, by Mr. Muchapelo, and by Mr. Semenya in different forms.
Mujapilo nomhlekazi uSimenye noHemraj baye babuza lo mbuzo ngezindlela ezohlukile ngoku ufuna ukubuza yena ngolhlobo kuwe.
Yes. Now, the question that I wanted you to clarify is whether, according to your knowledge of the geography of the place, you could have run freely towards the other crawls.
Ubuza kokokuba nje ngomuntu oyaziyo ke lendlela pha lendawo wena. Xa besenza lento beninako belivulekile na ibalo kokuba ningabalekela kwelo cala. Ebuhlanti obobunye.
Indlela ibikhona yokuba sibalekele ngakobo buhlanti mari ingekho kuba singabaleka singene kwesibaye kuba kuvaliwe ngecingo. Sibalekela endaweni right straight ibonakalayo ukuthi singaphuma kule ndawo.
There was an opening, yes, to run in that direction, but we wanted to run towards the road that would lead us in the direction in which we wanted to go.
No, sir. You said you've left out all the evidence about Ucingo. Bevalelo Ucingo. The witness said...
I'm still coming to that, sir.
Oh.
But then we were stopped by the wire whilst proceeding in that direction.
Thank you. Maybe this will be cleared up if we go for another inspection there.
Mhlawumbe kuzawucaca xa singaphinde siye siyojonga laa ndawo.
Actually, no. I'll clear that with another witness who's more familiar with that place. But anyway, you've said that there was fencing. Now, this...
Yes.
So, was apart from the gap, or let me put it this way, between the crawl excuse me, Chairperson. Just trying to find an appropriate slide. Let's look at 209.
209.
You see that on the northern side, or on the side closer to Nkaneng, there is a kind of standalone shack which you can see in front of the road.
Uthi xa usiya apha ngasecaleni laseNkanini kukho umkhukhu omi uwodwa phaya obonakalayo. Unjalo uthi khona ityotyombe elilodwa phaya elizimele lodwa.
That's the shack we can see on 208.
With oh yes, thank you, Chairperson. Exactly. And yes, is that the same shack that you can see on 208? Actually, 208 is a better picture.
Leli tyotyombe sithetha ngalo leli elibonakala apha ku-208 lilo elivele phaya.
Yeah, lilo.
Yes, it's the same shack.
Yes, and in fact, yeah, thank you, Chairperson. 208 covers my next question was whether that area is also fenced in, which is much clearer into it.
Ubebuzo kokuba le ndawo inalo ucingo olubiyele na.
kubiyiwe lapha kula ndawo inalamkhukhu.
The place is fenced off, yes.
Yes. Now, the between the corner of that fence and the crawl is about 20 meters, according to my unscientific measurement. I measured it there. You were there as well.
Uthi ngale minambe nawe pha uyakhumbula nathatha ukusuka apha kuphela khona ityotyombe ukuyaphaya ebhlanti indawo engabazi imeters ezingaba ngu-20.
Ya kunjalo.
It is so, yes.
Right. Now, apart from that gap, was there any other way for you to access the road to Nkaneng?
Ngaphandle ke kweso sikhewu sithetha ngaso kwakukhona enye indawo eyayivulekile beningakwazi ukuba niphume kuyo xa nisiya eNkaneng.
Yayingekho.
There was none.
Right. And is it true that when the shots started, the volley of shots was sprayed on the protesters, was it before or after you had reached that road?
Kuqala ke xa uva kujula phaya urhuluwa ololukhulu ziduma bese nifikile apha endleleni kanene ningakafiki.
Sase sijikele elokwesibaya.
We had already turned around the crawl,
imbumbulu.
then the firing started.
Had you reached the road?
Senifikile endleleni.
Asikafiki endleleni.
Before reaching the road.
Thank you. And if you had reached the road, what would you have done once you got there?
Banganidubulanga nade nafika phaya endleleni benizokwenza ntoni benizawuyaphi?
Sasingazukwenza nto sasibalekela emkhukhwini qha.
There was nothing that we were going to do, so safe to say we were running away towards the settlement. That's all.
Yes, okay, maybe I'll put it in a difficult way by saying, what would you have done? Let me just say, when you had reached the road, what would have been your movement? Into what direction?
Straight towards the Czech settlement.
Thank you. Now, whilst you are there, just a quick one. There was an issue about your evidence using the bush knife to cut wood. Remember that?
Uyakhumbula uthi lu bush uyusebenzise xa uyawukapa phaya izinto zokubasa phaya emthini.
Kunjalo.
It is so, yes.
Yes. Now, we see just here in these pictures that we have dealt with, we see 3 crawls, at least. Those crawls, do you know where and they are all bush crawls, is that correct?
Andithi apha kule mfanekiso kukho izibaya buhlanti obuthathu. Uthi ngoku obu buhlanti bonke bakhiwe ngezihlahla ezinameva ezidlabayo. Kunjalo. We cut those thorn trees with our bush knives, build the crawls for our cattle.
Thank you. Yes, just sir.
Enkosi.
I know what bush kraals meant, but I think the answer is it's a kraal made from thorn bushes that have been cut with the knives. I think that's the answer came out before I had a chance to put my problem.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Yes. And those people who build those kraals, do you know where they get the wood, the bushes?
Uyazi okokuba aba bantu abakha obubuhlanti bayithatha phi le mithi abakha ngayo phaya?
Sigawula kwakhona phaya
We
ehlathini.
Tit in the vicinity of that thicket.
Thank you. All right. Then there was from Mr. Mutau's cross-examination.
Lekazi umntawu yena uyawabuza lento.
There was an issue about whether or not you were present. I think the word was present, because that's the word used in your statement, during the march of the 11th of August. You remember that?
Uyakhumbula kubuza okokuba wawukhona kule march eyayenzeka nge-11 zika-August.
Ndiyakhumbula.
I remember that, yes.
Now, without picking words and semantics, one thing that is not disputed is that you had shots being fired on that day.
Into ke evelile engakhanyelwa ukuthi weva kuduma kukho imbumbulu apho kudutyulwe.
Ndayiva le.
I heard that, yes.
Yes. Now, can you then explain to the Commission, when you had those shots, all we can know is that you were within earshot of or hearing shot of the gunshots. But can you explain to the Commission where you were in relation to the area that we are discussing? I don't want to suggest the answer.
Apho zazivela khona ezimbulu waziva nje okokuba kuqhuma imbumbulu ngapha. Ungathi wena ubukuphi ngelo xesha ubufuphi noma usekudeni kangakanani?
Bendisekudeni.
I was quite far.
Okay, let me put it this way.
Between
yeah. All right. And we're not using the NUM office. Okay, let me say between the stadium and the taxi rank, where would you have been? In fact, there are photos.
Ke mandingasebenzise ele office limbiza ngegama. Mandithi phakathi kwe stadium. In the stadium and the taxi rank.
The taxi rank, which is the end of the road.
Wawungabaphi nendawo.
Ndandise phakathi ne stadium.
Between phakathi ne stadium ne taxi rank.
Ndisaya ndiphakathi kwe stadium. Ndisaya ndingekade ndifike ngaphaya. Ngase ukuvelela inkomponi.
This was before I reached the side of the compound in the stadium, still proceeding in that direction.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he didn't say he was in the stadium. But
were you at some point between the stadium and the taxi rank? Had you not yet reached the taxi rank?
Stadium phakathi singezantsi.
Yeah, ndisaya.
Ungakafiki
Ndingekafiki kwi-taxi rank.
Mr. Chairperson, was the stadium was on the other side. I'd gone past the stadium, but before I reached the taxi rank.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then there was quite an issue, to say the least.
Wasekubakho le nto ke asakuyiveza ngoku umhlekazi.
About there being two groupings sitting at the copies, and me being the only person who didn't think so. Can we Go to slide number 188.
Masiye apha ku 188 uthi uve kuthethwa ngamaqela amabini abohlukile ehleli phaya entabeni into angayikholelwa ke noko leyo umhlekazi. 188.
Now, would you agree that if one is going to talk about distinct groupings, can you see that there was at least a grouping that is on copy 1 and another grouping on copy 2, just for starters?
Uthi xa ujongela umfanekiso kuyabona kukho abantu abala kwikopi incinci kukho abantu abaphaya kule kopi inkulu. Kunjani?
Maybe let me explain first. Let's just explain the geography. There are, according to the evidence, 3 copies there. One is the big one, and then there's a small one next to it, and then there's the one where you said there was spraying of water and so on behind both. Do you understand?
I understand, yes.
Yeah. And all I'm asking at this stage is, can you see that there's a grouping of people on page 188 who the picture is cut, obviously, but who seem to be on the big copy and another group that is on the smaller copy next to it?
Umfanekiso lo usikiwe kwelicala kukho abangavelanga kodwa kuyabonakala bakhona abahleli kule ntaba le abanye bahleli kule enye.
Can you see that?
Uyayibona loo nto?
Ngokwehlukahlukana kwamatye.
Depending on the availability of rocks there.
Yes, yes. And then, as if that is not enough, let's leave those 2 groupings on the 2 copies. And just deal with the people who are on the ground, so to speak. Can you see that there are 2 groups in front of the big copy and maybe another 2 groups, if you use the gaps as the separators in front of the small copies?
Xa ujongile phaya kukho amaqela ngokohlukana kwelinye nelinye kude kube khona elinye icela lesithathu.
Ngokuhlala kwabantu umuntu uhlala apho acinge ukuhlala khona.
People said differently. One would elect to sit with that group and one would select to sit with the other.
Yeah, anyway, look, I don't want to belabor this, but the point I'm making is that just a casual look at that, you can separate something like 6 different groupings, not the 2 that was
ujongile lo mfanekiso abantu bahleli ngohlukana ngade kube khona amaqela angaba mathandathu phaya abanye bahleli phaya abanye phaya kunjalo.
I prefer Mpofu
It
to
is
have
so.
the witness tell us, not himself tell us.
Okay, fair enough. In fact, even to make it, now that...
Sorry, Mr. Mpofu, it's really, I don't want to stop you, because I think I see the point you're endeavoring to make. But it's very largely a matter of observation. We can observe it as well as the witness can, really, by looking at the photographs.
Fair enough, yes.
But there may be some extra points you want to get from members.
One
Someone
more
who's there,
question,
so I won't stop you. But
Thank you, Chairperson.
it's really, you don't have to ask what you see in the photograph.
Yes.
If we can all see it.
Yes. No, Chairperson, thank you. I'll only ask one more question on this. Of the people that I've called on the ground, are you able to see that one of the things that separate the sections is the road that you say comes from Marikana to Kaneng.
uthi enye ke yezinto ezohlula aba bantu njengoba bahleli apha abanye bahleli ngapha kwendlela abanye ngale kulendlela evela eMarikana yenkanini kunjalo
kunjalo.
yes that's so
And the situation is also the same if you look at picture 190, which apparently is when Mr. Matunja was addressing the group, the
imeko
strikers.
ibiloko isenjalo apho kulo mfanekiso ngeli xesha kufika uMathunjwa azothetha nabaqhankqalazi kunjalo
Kunjalo.
yes it is so
Reach a suitable stage to take the Germans, will you
Thank
let
you,
me know?
Chairperson. Yes, I think this is it. I'm going to another topic, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Commission will take the tea, German.
xesha letiye sawubuya ngoku Commission is commencing. Masukumeni bagwethu.
The Commission resumes. You're still under oath. Mr. Mpofu, you still have some questions for the witness.
Khumbula ukuthi usafungile mfakabawo. Ewe still under oath.
Mr. Phatsha, you were also questioned about the people that you said were washing at the copy. You remember that?
Uyakhumbula ubuza imibuzo ngalamadoda bephaya entabeni ehlamba.
Ewe.
Yes.
And you said something about people who were sent to fetch the water. Where were these people fetching the water?
Wathetha nangabantu kube bethunyelwa phaya ukuba bayofuna amanzi. Bebawalanda phi lamanzi?
Amanzi alandwa emkhukwini.
From the shanties, from the shack settlement.
And who are these people who were fetching the water? And I think you were saying that in relation to the question whether there were buckets there, which you said there were.
Uthi kwakukho ama buckets apho bebawa kwakungobani ababantu kwakungabanye babo bantu bethunya bayolanda amanzi.
Kwakuthunywa nje sabula muntu okhoyo apho.
Anybody available there to would be sent to go and get water.
And then you were also asked about the time of washing. Are you able to say whether at that time, which was sort of early August, mid-August, what the weather was like? Can you still remember? Was it still winter? Was it already spring? Was it warm? Was it cold?
Wabuza nangexesha bebahlamba ngalo ababantu ngoku lento yenzeka phaya ku-August. Ekuqaleni usakhumbula okokuba kwakunjani, kwakubanda, kushushu?
Andikhumbuli kahle.
I'm not very certain of what the weather conditions were.
Yes. If you consider what you were wearing, the top that you were wearing, would that assist you in remembering whether it was cold or hot?
Ukhumbula ke ngento wayinxibile wena.
Let me interrupt you unduly. What the weather conditions were, we can easily ascertain from the Weather Bureau. So you may have a specific reason for asking this witness questions about it, but if it's an issue as to whether it was cold or hot or whatever it was on that particular day, we can find out from the Weather Bureau. We don't have to have a week of conflicting evidence from a whole lot of different witnesses as to what the weather conditions were. So you might bear that in mind for the future question you're going to ask this witness on this point.
Yeah, well, Chairperson, I'll bear it in mind, but I'm not asking about weather conditions in that fashion. I'm asking about the experience of the witness.
Well, he said he wasn't quite sure, he couldn't remember. So that being so, if certainty is required, we can get it elsewhere. That's the only point I'm making.
No, I accept that, Chair. Thank you very much. Right.
Semenya wants to say something. Either that or he's turned his microphone on by mistake. Mr. Semenya?
Mistake.
Chair, the record will show there are people with heavy blankets. It has absolutely nothing to do with the condition of the weather.
Well, if the weather shows that it was warm, you may be right. If the weather shows that it's bitterly cold, then it may. But that's a matter we can decide on later, truly.
Okay, I think let's get straight to the issue. You know that it has been suggested, the real issue, Mr. Phatsha, is that it has been suggested that people were dressed in a particular way in order to stave off rubber bullets. Do you remember that?
Uyivile lento ukuba abantu bebanxibe izinto ezithize ukuze bazikhusele kwi-rubber bullets.
kungokuba umuntu wembatha into ayicingileyo.
A person dresses the way he feels like. He does the thinking for himself.
Yes, except that. Well, the
Yeah,
question really that I wanted to ask you is,
Umbuzo yilo.
does it make sense to you that the same person would use blankets for rubber bullets and muti for live ammunition?
Umuntu angasebenzisa ibhayi okokuba angabethwa zirubber bullets abese sebenzisa intelezi ke okokuba imbumbulu zingangeni.
Andiyazi ke.
That I don't know, sir.
Thank you. Now, you've also said that and I think that this was quite an important answer that you gave. I'd like you to just elaborate for the Commission.
Uthi impendulo ebalulekile leqitha oye wayiveza apha.
You were asked by Mr. Semenya that if the police had asked you to disarm before the shooting, what would you have done? And you said you would have considered and disarmed. Can you explain that in more detail?
Uthi uye wabuza ngumhlekazi oSimenya apha ukuba xa amapolisa aye afika kuwe athi beka phansi izixhobo zakho ngaphambi kokuba kudutshulwe phaya ubuzokwenza ntoni wathi wena hayi ubuzozibeka phansi ucela ukuba usichazele kabanzi ke ngalonto. Yavana umbuzo?
Ophinde.
If you repeat the question, sir.
You were asked by my learned colleague, Mr. Semenya, what you would have done if the police had asked you to disarm, and he specifically said if that had happened before the shooting incident, you in plural, and you said we would have considered and disarmed. Can you explain that answer to the Commission?
Umhlekazi uSimenya uye wathi mayebuza wathi xa lento ibike yenzeka phambi kokuba kube khona oludubulo amapolisa eze kuni afike athi kuni sicela kokuba nibeke phansi izixhobo zenu benizokwenza ntoni wathi wena hayi besizawuvumelana nayo khawuchaze kokuba ubuchaze ukuthini ngokusho kanjalo.
Ngokuba asilwanga nawo.
Because we did not fight them.
Because you were not fighting with them, is that what you said?
Ngoba beningalwi nawo amapolisa.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, thank you, Chairperson. Now, you were also asked about the fact that some people may not necessarily have been from Kaneng. Can you tell us from where you were gathering at the mountain, which was the nearest residential area?
Uye wathi apha kwaba bantu babelapha abanye babo kabahlali eNkaneng kodwa kumbuzo ukuba kule ntaba apha beni kuyo ngeyiphi indawo yasekuhlaleni ekufuphi. Nkaneng settlement is the nearest.
I'm now going to ask you a set of questions, which is effectively the last group of issues that I want to deal with you. And I'm going to seek an indulgence from the chairperson because where I'm going with this will become clear after a few questions.
Sicela kube andivumele umhlekazi ngoba kuzawucaca emva kwexesha ukuba ndiqonde ntoni ngalento.
And maybe let me preface it like this. Do you think it is possible? You know that one of the key issues or objectives of this commission is to establish the truth and go beyond what the eye can see and try and get to the root causes. Do you appreciate that?
Yabona ukuba uyayiqonda injongo yale commission ukuba ibekele ukuba iphande ntoni enye yezinto ekufanele ukuba iqondisise inyaniso kuba vele inyaniso kungasinje into ebonayo inyaniso ivele ibonakala ukuba kwenzeka lento nalento. Uyayiqonda lonto?
Yeah.
I understand that, yes.
Now, do you think that for people like us sitting here on the podium who are learned people, with many degrees, for us to be able to understand the truth, it might be important to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody like you?
Uyayiqonda ke into yokuba njengathi ke aba bantu abahleli apha uthi aba bahleli lapha abantu abafunde egqitha abanye banezidanga ezininzi ukuze sikwazi ukuthi siyibone inyaniso kufanele kokuba sehle singene ezihlangwini zomuntu ofanana nawo bekhona apho kunjalo.
Andivanga kahle.
Question is not clear.
Do you accept that for us to get to the truth, to the real truth, one of the things we have to do is to try and understand these events from the point of view of somebody like you?
Ukuthi ke uthi thina ke kufanele sehle size kumuntu onjengawe nje sizibeke apha kwizinga lakho lento sijonge njengoba uyibona wena. Kunjalo?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, you've already testified that you only have effectively 1 year of schooling.
Uthe kubungqina bakho esikolweni waqimba nje unyaka wokuqala. Kunjalo?
Yebo.
Yes, sir.
And that you've been a rock driller for 30 years.
Kumsebenzi lo we-RDO ke usugqibe iminyaka engama-30.
Kunjalo.
Yes.
One of the things that some of us here might have found to be even irritating is the fact that you wanted questions to be repeated. Can you explain what your sense of hearing is like from the 30 years of working as a rock drill operator?
Awuchazele iCommission ke uthi kukho abanye apha bethu bengabaphathi kakuhle lento yokuba uthi kawundiphindele andiva kakuhle. Funa umhlekazi ubachazela ukuba emva kokusebenza iminyaka engama-30 uyi-rock driller ungumuntu apha ezindlebeni oseva kanjani?
Andiseva kakuhle ngoku.
I am quite hard of hearing presently.
Yes. And Mr. Zokwana, I think it was Mr. Zokwana who gave us an example of an old man that he knows who was also a rock driller for a long time. And Mr. Zokwana said that old man told him, Mr. Zokwana, that he now has to read the lips of his wife at home instead of listening to her.
Umhlekazi uzokwana uthe xa enikeza umngqina apha wathi lo msebenzi unento yokwenza nezindlebe uthi communitata utamkhulu amaziyo wasebenza iminyaka emininzi nayenza lo msebenzi uthi ngoku akaseva xa ethetha nomama ekhaya kufuze amjonge apha emlonyeni okokuba izindlebe uthini xa ezovisisa ukuba uthini.
Injalo.
It is so, yes.
Now, the gist of what I'm asking you, and I'm only a few questions away, is whether you'd agree with me that in examining this issue of the Marikana massacre. Would you agree with me that we don't have a right to judge you by our own middle class standards?
Chair, I don't understand that at all.
I don't want to stop you. Whether he thinks that or not is with respect neither here nor there. It's certainly a point you can make an argument.
Thank you.
The point you've made about his being hard of hearing after 30 years of rock drilling is a factor we have to bear in mind as well.
Yes.
With respect to him, his answer to the question you want to ask him isn't going to help us.
Yes.
It may well be we would come to a similar conclusion ourselves, assisted thereto by argument from you, but I think it's necessary to ask him.
Accept that, Chairperson.
Umgcinisihlalo uthi awunasinceda nganto lento sithe kufanele sijonge kakuhle lento kokuba siyibona kanjani ukuba sibuze le ndoda ekuphendule lo mbuzo kuyawuba nzima.
Yes, okay. I'll ask specific questions.
Buza lulandelayo.
And maybe I'll just use myself. Look, for somebody like me, it might be a strange thing for people to be washing in a group, a large group. What is the normal method by which people wash in the compounds?
Mandithi ke mhlekazi umuntu onjengami utsho yena umhlekazi umpofu uthi ngayibona jini kuyinto engachelekanga le kodwa ke ngesichelo phaya ezinkomponi amadoda ahlamba kanjani?
Ezinkomponi amadoda afola ilayini xa eya etshintshouse kuba ezinye itshintshouse zincane.
What happens is in the compounds, people actually queue. They stand in a queue to go and wash in the change house. It is the washing room because some of them are very small.
Again, for somebody like me, who has high walls and alarm systems, I might find it strange that you keep sharp weapons in your shack for protection, but what are the dangers that one might face in the conditions where you live?
Uthi ke njengomuntu onjengaye mfokabawo phaya ehlala khona kukho imthangala istop nonsense eziphakeme eziphaya phezulu nealarm ezezibona abantu abahamba ngaphandle ebusuku ngoku wena ke uhlala eTyotyombeni abayiqondi lento okokuba intoni ubeka izixhobo phaya eTyotyombeni kukho ubungozi obuthize na ongahle ujongane nabo xa uhlala endaweni enjengale yakho?
Phaya emikhukhwini kukhala impempe ungazi uba ikhaliselwani okwexesha omnye uyeba omnye uvingcele omnye yiyo lento idala into yoba masibe nezixhobo kuba asazi uba uphethe ntoni wamntu alimaze omnye ole kanjani.
The position is, Mr. Chairperson, in the shack settlement where we stay, sometimes a whistle is blown, and the blowing of a whistle indicates something has happened. Either there's a theft taking place or some other crime is being committed, and we keep these weapons because we do not know what it is that the perpetrator or the other person has.
And also, you might want to tell the Commission how it feels for you, following from the question you were asked by Mr. Nsebeza and under cross-examination, to have to abandon an organization to which you have contributed part of your salary for 30 years.
Kumbuzo ye wabuza umhlekazi Nsebenza apha ubuza yena umhlekazi umpofo kuba njengomuntu obelilungu lalombutho iminyaka emininzi kangaka ukhupha imali le bayithathayo uziva kanjani ngoku xa kunyanzeleka okokuba uyeke lo mbutho?
Ndiziva ndibuhlungu kuba ezamali bendizikhupha azindenzela nganto.
I feel very much hurt, sir, because all the money that I have contributed towards this organization hasn't benefited me in any way.
Finally, in that line of questioning, I think on 2 occasions, you, in explaining the your change of unions, you said that it is because the NUM had shot at you, and it was explained to you by us that you were not shot. You remember that?
Uyakhumbula okokuba xa ubuzwa kokuba yintoni ngokuyenza kokuba ushenxe uphume kulombutho wathi wena kokuba lombutho wanidubula kodwa kwavezwa kokuba wena awudutshulwanga wena ngokwakho kunjalo uyayikhumbula lonto?
Ndiyakhumbula.
I remember that, yes.
And yesterday, in the same vein, you said that you had, after the crawl incident, you had to go to die where the others were dying.
Kho enye into eyayithetha apha izolo xa ubuzwa wathi wena ubuyawufela apho abanye befele khona. Uyayikhumbula lonto?
Kunjalo.
I remember that.
And once again, it was explained to you that you are alive.
Asekuthiwa kuwe hayi awufanga wena ndithi ukhona apho uyaphila.
Ndiyakhumbula.
I remember that, yes.
Can you explain to the Commission why it is that you felt that if one of your colleagues was shot or if the other one had died, that it was you who was being shot and who had died?
Ungayichazela in commission lo okokuba xa omnye wogxabeni ogxabakho edujuliwe usho kanjani okokuba nawe uziva ngokwakho udujuliwe?
Awuphinde?
The question would be repeated.
Can you explain to the Commission why it is that on those two occasions, let's start with the one where of the shooting, why you said, I left the NUM because they shot at me, meaning you, Mr. Phatsha, and why you felt that they were shooting at you when we know that the bullets went through somebody else's flesh?
Umbuzo la ubuza umhlekazi umpofu kuba yintoni leyenza ukubothethe ngolhlobo uzifake wena uthi phaya xa kudutshulwa wathi wena NUM indidubulile ingadubulanga wena idubule abanye oxa bakho apha wathi ufuna ukuyofela apho kufele khona abanye yintoni ubeka ngolohlobo lento?
Kukungokuba phaya bendibalekela khona bekuvaliwe ndabaleka ndaphinda emva ndaya ufela kule ndawo kufela abanye kodwa ke ndasinda ngamandla kaThixo.
It's because the place the direction in which I was running was closed. I had to turn back and I was then injured. I then decided I would run to the place where the others are dying in order to go and die there. But I did not die, Mr. Chairperson. Through the grace of the Almighty, I was saved.
That's not really an answer to the question, but I think the point that the Council is trying to make to you is that it's a basic principle of trade unionism and various other forms of activity that an injury to one is an injury to all.
And
so I take it that you felt that if your colleagues were killed while engaged in an enterprise in which you were engaged, it was as if you'd been killed as well. And if your colleagues were attacked in similar circumstances, it was in effect an attack on you in accordance with this basic principle. An injury to one is an injury to all. I think, is that the point you're trying to make, Mr. Mpofu?
Chair, you stole the words right from my mouth. It was exactly the next proposition. Thank you, Chairperson.
Please accept my proposition.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Uyibone engakayithethi lonto bethetha nalonto andithi apha emibuthweni le yabasebenzi kukho lento ethi into enzeka komnye uxa wakho yenzeka kuwe le kuthiwa injury to one is an injury to all xa kwenzakala omnye senzakele sonke andithi bothetha ngalonto
enjalo.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you. I'm indebted to the Chairperson. Now, I put something to Mr. Zokwana about a tendency maybe to take people like you or other RDOs for granted or to undermine their intelligence. And I want to ask you about two answers that you gave yesterday. or rather to clarify, did
So, Mr. Chair, this must be put properly. The questions were raised with Mr. Zokwana, and Mr. Zokwana entirely distanced himself from the idea that
Yes.
him as an organization, in fact, belittles people in the
No,
position
absolutely.
of RDOs. So that must be put before questions about it are raised.
You've now put that in record. He says he's going to ask the witness about two answers he gave, to clarify the answers he gave. Okay, that clearly is something that can appropriately be done in re-examination. Once the introductory remarks that you disagree with have been rectified. Please
Yes.
carry on, Mr.
Thank you.
Thetho
Thank you.
ekhona apha kuthetha ngemibuzo yajongiswa kumhlekazi uZokwana apho aphendula khona njengoba esitsho kokuba wathi yena iNUM ingumbutho enenkathalo yabakhathalela abantu bayo.
Thank you.
Uzawubuza lo mbuzo ke kuleyo nto.
Thank you. Yes, and in fairness to Mr. Tip and Mr. Zokwana did agree with me and did not associate himself with that conduct. But the issue really, I want to ask you, Mr. Phatsha,
Umbuzo ke endizawubuza yilo landelayo umhlekazi Phatsha.
is that, we know that the employer that you say you were waiting for had taken the attitude that they were not going to speak to you, to your group, unless if you had disarmed. We know that.
Siyayazi ke into yokubana umqeshi wayethe yena umi kuloo ndawo kokuba kanawuthetha nani saphethe izixhobo. Siyayazi loo nto.
But the question is, did the employer ever convey that message to you, to the group?
Into endifuna ukuyibuza yilena ke umqeshi wake wathumela wayiveza loo nto kuni okokuba misela ukuthetha nani bekani izixhobo phansi.
Zange ndive loo nto.
Never heard that.
Secondly,
Chairperson, it should be borne in mind
Wesibini,
that various communiques were distributed even up to the 16th of August. I'll deal with it at the relevant point.
You can deal with part of your case, but I mean, I'm not sure that any communiques were ever distributed by carrier pigeon or anything else on the copy. And it's not, the point being made, I think, is the people in the copy didn't know that. And he says they didn't. You obviously may wish to challenge that. If you want to ask further questions following on the re-examination on this point, I'll allow you to do so. Alternatively, you may wish to lead evidence on it, but it's a perfectly permissible question, and so I shall allow Mr. Mpofu to proceed.
uyawumvumela uMpofu babuze lo mbuzo umntawu uthi ke kukho izincwadi ezaphuma ezininzi apho kwakuthethwa khona uthi umhlekazi uMpofu uthetha ngento eyenzeke phaya entabeni.
Mr. Phatsha, do you know what a communique is? And if you do, did you ever receive it?
Kukho izinto uyazazi wena ezi zinto ziyezi ingxelo ezithize ezikhushwa ngezincwadi noma enjalo uke wayifumana into enjengaleyo.
Azange ndiyifumana.
Never received any such.
Thank you. Now, similarly, we know that the police had taken the attitude that they were going to move to the so-called tactical phase, which meant encircling and disarming and arresting some of the people in your group.
Sinolwazi ke apho kokuba eso sigqibo sasesenziwe phaya emapoliseni ukuba inyathelo abazakulithatha ngoko kokuba banizungeze bangwe abaqhaqalazi phaya bathathele izixhobo babanje.
But did anybody from the police ever care to say that to you as a group before the barbed wire was pulled?
Kokuba phambi kokuba banibiyele ngolucingo kukhona ipolisa elakeleza noma mhlambe leza phaya kunilanxela phaya entabeni ukuba inyathelo sizokulithatha ngoku leli lilandelayo.
Zange ndiyivele.
Nobody I never had that.
When the barbed wire was being pulled, would it have been clear to you what was going to happen next, whether you were going to be shot at, arrested, assaulted, or given food?
Caca kuni okokuba xa kwenzeka lento yokuba nahamba labantu batsala olucingo kokuba yeza bayavala apha. Kwanicacela okokuba injongo yaloyo nto yintoni okokuba nizobethwa apho nizobanjwa nizodutyulwa kanye nizophiwa ukutya.
Open.
Yanicacela apho.
Opened.
Just repeat the question, sir.
Okay, I'll simplify it. When the barbed wire was being pulled,
Babecala ucingo.
Well, just to put the question on the basis, when the barbed wire was pulled, what did you think was going to happen, or what do you think the police were going to do? Previously, you gave a whole series of alternatives which might well be regarded as leading, but it's better to put it in the way I suggest, I would say.
thank you, Chairperson. I'm indebted to the Chairperson.
Uthi makawubuza lo mbuzo ucace okokuba ubuza ntoni.
Okay, I'll ask it in even a more open-ended way. When the barbed wire was being pulled by the Nyalas, did you have any idea what the intention of the police was?
Nanka amapolisa ke sebiya phaya vala ngocingo. Waba wena wacinga okokuba kuzokwenzeka ntoni ngoku yintoni lebafuna ukuyenza babantu.
No, sorry, that's not the question.
Question is?
No, the question is not what did he think was going to happen. The question is whether did he know or not know what the intention of the police was.
Umbuzo ke yilo namhlekazi ndiyaxolisa. Wawusazi na okokuba yintoni ejonga ukwenziwa ngaba bantu.
Ndandingayazi into eyenziwa ngaba bantu.
I did not know what was intended by these people.
Okay, now, finally,
Ekugqibeleni ke
I accept. I know that you don't want us to talk about Mr. X.
ndiyazi okokuba lento ka Mr. X awuvani tu nayo ukuba ubuzwe ngayo.
Namanje.
Even now, sir.
Yes, but please forgive me.
Sakunixolela ke mthembu.
You've already testified that the things that Mr. X is going to say are things that you either don't know or you deny.
Usixelele kuba ezo zinto zawuthetha nguMr. X apha zizinto ozikhanyelayo ikanene onganalwazi ngazo.
Namanje.
Even now, yes. But there's something that I think is important, which you said.
Kukho into apha ebalekile eyavezwa nguwe apha xa usithi
your evidence, or rather, you were asked about, you were told that the so-called group of warriors called itself Makaraba. You remember that?
uyakhumbula ubuzwa uxelelo okokuba la machantlisiyo abezibiza ngokuthi ngomakaraba uyayikhumbula loo nto?
Ndiyayikhumbula.
I remember that, yes.
And you said more than once to the commission that the only Makaraba you know is a protective hat that you wear in the mine. Is that correct?
Uthi wena into yaziyo njengomakaraba phaya ngumnqwazi lwathwala phaya ezimayini ewenzele okokuba amatye anganibetha bezinto angenzakalisi.
Kunjalo.
It is so, yes.
So, if Mr. X, the off chance that Mr. X is correct on at least one thing, would you describe the Makaraba that you know as a tool of attack or a tool of defense?
xa ezawuthetha ngolo hlobo ke uMr X lo mhlawumbi intetho yakhe ivakale umakarabha lona usebenzisayo sisixhobo sokulwa noma sisixhobo somsebenzi
umakalabha esimsebenzisayo simsebenzisela into yoba sivikela amatye angasibethi ezintloko.
The makarapa we use, this protective helmet, is actually intended as an instrument to use so that the rocks don't cause us injuries when they fall on our heads.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have nothing further.
Gqibile ngokumhlaza.
Thank you. You indicated that you had a difficulty in relation to the point about communicators. Do you want to ask any further questions on that limited point?
No, Chair, I'll deal with it together with the other outstanding aspects. Thanks.
Ubebuza ke ngalento yokuba kwavela intetho eziningi phaya uthi uzawuyiveza loo nto xa kufika ixesha lokubenze njalo umhlekazi uMutawu.
Thank you, Mr. Phatsha. You're excused.
Mhlekazi Phatsha inkosi kakhulu siyabulela utsho umgcini ngaphambili ugqibile ngoku.
Nam ndiyabulela mhlale ngaphambili.
I thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you very much.
I'm trumping.
Chair, ungayehla tata. Ngosi.
Go, Ms. Barnes.
Just before the next witness is called, I was hoping for permission to place something on record.
Well, it depends what it is, I suppose, but we better wait until the... That would be presumptuous. Sorry, Ms. Barnes, you were going to say something before that handshaking ceremony took place.
At least you won't get reprimanded for greeting, Chairperson.
Uthi umhlekazi uMpofu bangambeki ityala bangamtyholi uzangwa xa ebulisa phaya esephuma uvuyile enkosi.
Chair, it relates to Mr. Gavin Hartford and an incorrect impression that appears to have been created in the Commission regarding his relationship with certain of the parties. I just need to explain what happened and correct it, and I'd like to do that by reading a very short statement into the record, if I may.
Mama uBans apha uchaza kokuba mayingajonga lento kokuba ubulisa abantu abathize phaya ngoba kukho udlelwano noma okuthize kho uzayichaza lento kuba into nenza ngolo hlobo.
Thank you, Chair. The AMCU team wishes to make the statement in order to correct an erroneous impression that has been created in the Commission regarding Mr. Gavin Hartford.
Mr. Gavin
Hartford.
Chaza ke ngento eyenzeke apha ngoHartford uGavin Hartford. I-team leya-AMCU ithanda ukuba uyichaze lento.
On the 24th of January 2013, in the course of cross-examining Mr. Eric Elikshana, Advocate Barnes, who's myself, on behalf of the AMCU team, introduced as an exhibit an article by Mr. Gavin Hartford entitled "The Mining Industry Strike, What Are the Causes and What Are the Solutions?"
Uthe ngomhla ka-24 kuJanuwari kuwo lo nyaka yena umama Barnes xa eveza umnqina apha waveza into ebhalwe ngulo mhlekazi athetha ngaye apha eyayithetha nge-mining industry nezinye ke izinto ezifana nezo.
In the course of introducing the article, there was an exchange between myself and the chairperson of the Commission, in terms of which the chairperson asked where the article came from, and I then answered as follows.
Abakho imbuzo ke evela kumgcini sihlalo kokuba le phepha alivezayo phaya zokulifunda njengobungqina livela phi wabese ethetha echaza ngolu hlobo.
This appears from the transcript. Chair, I'm afraid I'm not entirely sure where this article was published. We are planning to call Mr. Gavin Hartford as a witness in phase 2, so I'm sure he will tell us. He will then be able to confirm the contents of the article.
Athi ke xa echazela asinanya ukuba livela phi kodwa ke siza kumbiza uGavin Hartfield ezonikeza ubungqina apha uzawutsho yena kokuba le ntetho ivela phi.
Mr. Gavin Hartford is an independent expert witness whose paper was submitted in order to provide analytical context for understanding the events that led up to the Marikana shootings.
Umhlekazi lo uGavin Hartfield ke ngumuntu nguchwepheshe onolwazi inzululwazi kwezi zinto ezenzekayo apha ngakho ubeveza imbono yakho kokuba ibe yintoni imbangela yezi zehlakalo zaseMarikana.
He specifically does not represent any organizations involved in the proceedings of the Farlam Commission. He was in fact never intended to be called as a witness for the AMCU team and was only intended to be called as a witness for the families team if required. This was stated... Sorry.
Ukhoqela ke apha kuthi emenalo lo mhlekazi lona uvezwe nje ngomuntu ongahle abiza ukuba linqina la le family xa kunesidingo sokuba kwenzeke oko.
This was stated by the families team in its opening statement.
Team le emele ifamily ithe ekvezeni kwayo apha ekuqaleni yaveza ngolohlobo.
I did not intend to convey in my exchange with the chairperson that has been referred to earlier that Mr. Hartford was to be called by the AMCU team or that he was working in any way for AMCU.
Bekungeyona ke injongo yami xa ndithetha lento kokuba ndinikeze inkolelo yokuba uGavin Huntlona umele team le ya AMCU noma uzawubizwa ndim njengenqini.
I intended to convey that Mr. Hartford was to be called as a witness for the families team and that I would, if necessary, ask him about the authenticity of his article.
Bendinethemba kokuba uyawubizwa ngaba bemele ifamily mna ndibuze nje imibuzo ephathelene nalento xa ethetha endikeza ubungqina bakhe apha umhlekazi uHartfield.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Enkosi kakhulu.
Thank you. That then makes clear what you had intended, I take it from the beginning, to make clear.
Uthi umgcini hlalo icace kakuhle lento ke njenge kathi emhlophe xa ihlelo hlungwini.
Zimpofu?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm ready to call my next witness. However, as I indicated on Friday, between the two witnesses, I was intending to move a certain application. I see that it's a little bit too early even for an early lunch, because I would have suggested just to use that natural break to get my ducks in a row, but also to confer with Mr. Ntsebeza on the issue of the application. If the chairperson is so inclined, could we just ask for maybe a longish break which may incorporate the lunch, just so that we don't waste too much time? What time is it? It's 20.
Half hour lunch adjournment.
Can we make it an hour, Chairperson, please? I know you're trying to make up the time for Friday. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll adjourn now until 1:30.
Thank you very much.
Commission will now adjourn.
Uphuma ngoku singene 1:30.